Welcome, welcome, welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast from the WELT studios here in Fort Wayne. Caleb Hatch and Justin Kinney with you. Slow news week in IndyCar world after all the chaos the previous 2 weeks, but we welcome a special guest this week. We do this every year with our Fantasy IndyCar Challenge and the Friends of NTR Podcast 2024. Our winner, Dan Coogan, of course, putting that back on the 1982 race start, AJ Foyt's comments, Kevin Kogan, and botching the start of that race. But our winner, and one of my friends, and Justin also knows, Nathan Harden. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good to join you. So,
first off, you chose the name just because you love that interview, right?
Yeah, actually, so that's a classic start to a race. One of the best kind of first two rows of any Indy 500, and then the classic start coming to the green flag when Kevin Kogan, God knows what happens, but just runs right into the side of, I think it was Mario, and then AJ hits him, or vice versa, whatever it was, but takes out AJ, and then AJ's interview response shortly after that was an all-time classic. I think that's actually, I feel like that's one of the lines that you always like to imitate is AJ's line of "Damn Coogan," like he didn't even know who the guy was.
You talk about the grid for that race. This is wild, and there's of course a name that doesn't belong. It's funny when you look back, but the starting grid, Rick Mears was on the pole. Then it was Kevin Kogan, who was a Penske driver, in the middle of row one, AJ Foyt outside of row one. Then you have Mario Andretti, Gordon Johncock, and then Bill Whittington randomly is somehow starting sixth in that race. Well, not randomly. We know why, but but it's fascinating that it was that much talent. It kind of reminds you of what 91. What that all Penske, or no, 80, was it 87, 88? Which
88, I believe.
88 was the other all Penske front row.
2024.
In 2024, and then 91, right, was Mears, Mario, and AJ.
Yeah, across the front.
On the front row. So it definitely compares, at least with the first two rows, to those front rows as well. So let's talk to you about IndyCar. The problem is I know the answers to a lot of these questions, but we have to ask anyway since I've known you forever. Really, since I could really know anyone. So IndyCar, you've been an IndyCar fan your whole life. First race you attended, how you got into IndyCar?
The first race was the 1996 Indy 500, which was, I didn't know this at the time, but in hindsight, knowing the history of the 500 and of the split, 96 was a good opportunity to go to your first 500 because there was a few more tickets available. And so that was my first 500. I was up with basically my mom's whole side of the family, aunts, uncles, cousins up in turn two, and saw my first race there at, I think 7 years old. So that was first experience, and I've been hooked ever since. I think I've missed 3 500s since 1996. So keeping the streak alive as best I can.
And what are some of your top memories since you've been going to the 500?
Oh, boy. In 2006, that was the first time Caleb and I went to a 500 together. We were in high school and just bought a bunch of GA tickets and tried to give them away to people. And so that was an interesting experience. It was, goodness, like 100 degrees that day, and a heck of a finish, obviously, and seeing Michael and Marco racing up front. So that was a great one. 2007 was memorable for a very different reason. Caleb and I were sitting on the front stretch there and sat through multiple rain delays and rain shortened, but it was an experience. And then definitely 2011, we were up in our seats in turn 4 where we're at now, and sitting there imagining what it's going to be like to see a rookie J.R. Hildebrand win that race and following his car all the way through turns 3 and 4, and it's like, well, it seems like Charlie Kimball might be in the way. Yep, he is. And then just to see him go right in the wall and then have no clue who won the race for what felt like 5 minutes. It was in reality just a few seconds, but that was certainly one of the most memorable finishes by far. The other one, I got to make mention of this. I think 2021 was memorable, certainly for the race crew that I was with, Caleb included. Obviously, Elio's 4th win, and he's famous for climbing the fence. So I had some liquid courage and decided to jump over the railing and join him in his fence climbing excursion as he was coming around on the pace car. So that was fun. My the guys I was with weren't sure where I went, so there's actually a video that one of them recorded.
We didn't know where you were, and suddenly, wait, there's Nathan on the fence.
Yeah, it was a little higher up than what I remember at the time, but yeah, I was up there a bit. So yeah, that was memorable in a different way.
Yes, for sure. Obviously, a great moment that we're always going to talk to you about forever. So, for the record, so Nathan and I grew up together. He lives in the Indy area. We've been to every Indy 500 together since 2009. I was on a family vacation in 2008, so he's part of our group where we go to the race every year. We talk IndyCar all year long with a group chat with one of his brothers, one of my brothers, one of our other kind of race friends as well. So you've been an IndyCar fan forever. Obviously, your first 500 was 96. Who have been your favorite drivers over the years, since I know you've cycled through a few?
Yeah, no, I always hate that question because I always feel like I give like a company line answer. Like historically, my answer has always been I root for whoever would be best for IndyCar's long-term success. I mean, that's like the worst answer of all time. But I've always kind of had a thing for kind of the second or third generation drivers, like the Graham Rahal's, the Marco Andretti's. So faced a lot of disappointment because of that for 15, 20 years. But I've always thought it was really cool whenever there's relatives of previous legends that come back and race in the series and kind of keep that family legacy alive. So I've always liked those kind of drivers. There's a lot more drivers that I like than don't like, but there's a few on that list of ones that I just cannot root for to save my life. That's for sure.
Okay, all-time favorite driver, and then your favorite driver at the moment.
I would say all-time favorite would. Boy, my brother's going to tear me up for this one. I would say Marco Andretti.
Oh, I thought you would have said Ari. I'm actually surprised by this.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I always had a soft spot for Ari Line because when I started, watching, obviously he was the star that kind of stuck with the IRL at the split. And then 97 was my second 500, even though that one didn't get to watch most of that race because it ran on a Tuesday. But so I was super pumped when he won. So yeah, he was definitely the early one for sure. And then around the time he retired, it was not too long after when Marco came on. So those are definitely the two. And the other question was current driver.
Yes,
because I wouldn't put Marco on that list. I still really like Graham. I like Colton, but man, this year, Santino Ferrucci, I am on the Santino Ferrucci train. That dude is awesome. I mean, he's a total a-hole, and I love it. He is so fun to watch, and he's not out there trying to be polite to anybody. It feels like what old school racing would look like, which I think is probably why AJ really likes having him on the team.
Yeah, and we're so limited with those types of guys. It used to be littered with guys like that, and even in NASCAR, you talk about Tony Stewart, you talk about even Kyle Busch is kind of like that, and it's too tame in the IndyCar paddock. He needs somebody in there, at least one, and luckily we have a Santino Ferrucci. Nathan, in terms of other races that you've been to, what stands out? Maybe what's your favorite locale to go outside of Indy?
So I've been to a few of them. Lived out in Phoenix for a while, so went to the Phoenix Oval race. I think they ran there 3 times. I think I went twice.
You were that guy that was there.
Yeah, that was me.
That was you?
Yeah,
okay.
It was just me. Well, Caleb came out the first year, so you probably saw both of us. We pretty much had a whole section to ourselves. So that was not one of my favorites, but it's one of the ones that I went to. But it was unique. We went out to Mid-Ohio, 5 years ago or so?
Yeah, I think as 2019.
Yeah, it was probably before COVID. And that was a really unique experience. Like I had never been to a road course race before. At least not. I mean, I'd been to I think IMS before that, but that's a very different experience. But Mid-Ohio, that was like kind of the first, get out of the Indianapolis area, go see a road course, and we didn't camp for that weekend, but Caleb's other brother did, and so we kind of dropped in on their stuff on race day and got to watch that race. So that was a really, really cool, unique track. They got an incredible fan base there and great racing. I think that was the race where was it Rosenquist was closing in on Dixon towards the end there, trying to make a late race pass in the keyhole. So that was a great one. We went to Kentucky back when they were still running there. Probably been a decade or more ago. And that was cool. I think we saw, was that Ed Carpenter's first win? I think it was.
Yes.
So it's been a long time ago if Ed Carpenter was winning races. So that was a really unique experience there.
In terms of your strategy to pick drivers, was there a science to it? Was it random? Take us through the process of every race weekend, what you decided.
Yeah, so the number one hint actually came from Caleb's brother, Micah, who won a few years ago. The number one secret is you can't forget to pick races.
That's true.
That seems pretty obvious.
So true. I forgot one this year, and I was done.
I don't know if Caleb has ever gone a whole season without forgetting a race. So that's the number one thing you have to pick. And so as soon as IndyCar opens it for picks, just pick 4 drivers, and then the top 3. Just get picks in there just in case something comes up. You can't make picks.
So you don't wait till after qualifying to make your picks?
I will go in and change it after qualifying. I will always revise it after qualifying. I don't care about practice results. That doesn't really mean much of anything to me. If it's an oval, never pick anyone on Ray Hall. Scratch them off your list. And then road courses, that's tough. I mean, there's a lot of good teams. Penske's are always good on short ovals too, and road courses. Andretti's good on road courses. So I just tried to keep a pretty balanced team. But there were one of the late races, I think it might have been Milwaukee, maybe. I'm not sure what it was, but felt confident about like willpower and I forget who else it was. There was 2 drivers. I just felt supremely confident about them that weekend. So I picked the 2 of them and then filled in with, the Christian Rasmussens and Linus Lundqvists of the lineups. And that one worked out well for me because I think the 2 guys that I picked to finish well, I think they were first and second or first and third. So yeah, it's a lot of dumb luck, but you got to make the picks. You can't forget races. That seems easy enough, but every year, undoubtedly, I almost forget one. So
you mentioned not wanting to pick any Ray Hall. Is there a particular driver that under no circumstance will you pick? Either they're starting second, they're starting 25th. Is there one driver like I'm never putting this driver in my lineup?
I think I don't want to say I'm personally responsible for the very few failures that Alex Palou has had in the last few years, but I've probably only picked him twice, and that's probably been the 2 times he's not finished in the top 5 or top 10. Yeah. So
that's
maybe
interesting.
I should just do IndyCar a favor next year and just pick him every weekend. Different winner. Really just never, ever pick Ray Hall on ovals. If they're, on the pole by some stroke of God, if they get on pole, still never pick them. That's about the only one I can think of off the cuff. I had a hard time trusting Andretti last year. They would always qualify well, but it just never seemed like they could bring it home. So not as bad this year, which I think kind of helped me since there weren't too many failures like there were in prior years with top teams.
I'm taking notes. Okay, so don't pick a Ray Hall on ovals, which I probably made that mistake. Don't forget to pick a race. Definitely made that mistake. I forgot Barber. I was out of town that weekend. and then don't pick Alex Palou.
Apparently.
Which I certainly picked him.
Championship, then pick him.
Yeah, yeah. It goes against everything you would believe, but you got the win and got the win handily. Like it was 121.5 points. So
Man.
you were pretty dominant down the stretch. You were just like Palou, and you just kind of had to coast to the finish.
Yeah, and on the day of the Nashville race in the finale, we actually had planned a whole big family trip down to Disney World, and so that day of the race, we were in Magic Kingdom, and I was checking my phone like every day of the week leading up to it. I was like, man, they got to open this thing because I got to make picks. I am not going to be able to change them on race day or maybe even the day before that. So I was sweating it, but I knew I had a pretty comfortable lead and just needed to get 4 names on there, and that would be enough.
Give you 4 good ones, right?
That's right, 4 good ones. Yep.
But he was lapping the field. You said how much did he win by?
121.5. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like one of those classic races that people say what a race this was when there was 1 or 2 people on the lead lap at the end of the race.
So pretty much any 500 before 1996.
Yeah, pretty much.
Outside of 82.
Yeah, I don't remember. This is my opportunity to gloat here a little bit. I think the first race of the season I did pretty well. I honestly don't know if I was ever not first all season long. So I'm going to toot my own horn there a little bit. But I was up there the whole season, so that obviously a little more nerve-wracking because then you just wait to absolutely fumble it and give it away. But it luckily didn't happen.
Yeah, there are several teams on your tail. Random Split Era Team of the Week, which, by the way, love that name, and put me on the podcast racing. Came in 2nd and 3rd. There are a few others challenging throughout that kind of faded, but those are the teams who finished 2nd and 3rd. But you got it done. Let's talk more IndyCar, where IndyCar's at, future of IndyCar. What is one race that's not on the calendar that you want to see on the calendar in the future?
Well, I mean, Mark Miles probably isn't going to like me, but I think we can go back to some of the races we've been at before, like at the Glen. I think did he even mention that one by name as kind of his poster child for things he doesn't want to go back to?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, smart. So that would be fun. I'm going to try and avoid saying any ovals because I know what Justin's response is going to be.
Nobody shows up.
Buy a ticket and show up. But I do. I mean, really, I think it's less about a specific track and more about regions in the U.S. that they need to have a little bit more of a presence at. We talk about the Northeast all the time. It's kind of that big time area. Texas now, since the oval went away, and there's a bit of a hole down there in kind of the south central kind of Texas area. So I think those regions of the U.S. IndyCar needs to be present in. I think they also need to be more present in Canada, Mexico City. That one seems like a no-brainer, but I don't know. Maybe Mark Miles has no brain. But that one seems like an absolute duh. They should be at Mexico City. And really anywhere in North or well, I don't want to say South America. There's been some fun ones down there. But I think it's just about hitting more areas in your region, kind of in your time zones. They have to be more present than just where they're at right now if they have any hope of growing. Obviously, NASCAR sees that because, when we were growing up, NASCAR's not racing outside of the South. And now they're expanding into all sorts of different areas, street courses in Chicago. So IndyCar's got to do a lot of the same to at least just keep up.
And when you look at maybe a race that you wouldn't mind falling off this, is there a race that that we're currently running that you're just like, I'm not a fan of this?
If you'd asked me that like 8 years ago, I thought the on-track product for Barber was not very good.
Yeah.
And now I'd put it as a top 5 race on the season. I mean, it's phenomenal how much that one has grown. Although it wasn't an official race, Thermal it was fun. Like, I don't mind it being on the schedule if you're going to get money for being there, and obviously they're using it as a more common testing facility now. I don't have a problem with it, but to me, that's something you drop on the calendar to fill in a gap when you don't have something else. But that's not a priority for me. For Iowa, better fix something big time, or else I'm scratching Iowa off that list. I would rather have no Iowa race than what we saw this year. It was awful. So,
all right, let's say
that's about it.
Let's say Nathan has unlimited money. Let's say you're Roger Penske for a day. What's your top priority when it comes to IndyCar?
It's going to be, well, I'm not sure how to split these two up, but it's going to be a third OEM, getting somebody in the series, and it's going to be the development of a new car. Like, I don't mind this car. Like, I understand it's the same one since 2012. It looks, I mean, if you pull anybody from 2012 that's not familiar with IndyCar, you show them the 2012 car, and you show them the car we have today, they look vastly different. They run different. I think in a lot of ways they probably operate differently. But I think as we've seen, we have kind of maximized what this car can do. And the more things they add to it, like an aero screen, like you're adding things to a car that was never intended to be there, and so that affects some of the handling. Maybe that's some of the results we're seeing at places like Iowa, and that's the repercussions of it. So those are definitely the two biggest things. I don't really care who the third OEM is. You can bring in Daewoo. I don't care, as long as they've got the money, as long as they can produce a good engine that's competitive with the other two, for sure.
So Opel, Citroen,
Lotus,
Geo. Do you remember Geo?
Lotus, I think probably had their chance.
They had their shot.
I also don't even know if they exist anymore. Of course, they didn't really exist back in 2012 either. So
Jean Alesi's still waking up in cold sweats. With,
yes,
having to deal with the Lotus.
Oh, Slotus memories. So Justin, you actually stole my next question. So I'm trying to think of something good to fill in here. I guess with IndyCar and being a fan for so long, you've seen high highs and low lows for the sport. Where do you think IndyCar is at, say, in 5 years?
Oh, goodness. Well, it could be a lot of different areas. I mean, they could be acquired by Formula One in 5 years and kind of become a North American F2 series, and I wouldn't be overly surprised. I don't think that's the best thing for IndyCar, but I wouldn't be surprised. Similar with NASCAR. I mean, they could be a kind of a NASCAR open wheel series, and I honestly wouldn't be overly surprised by that either. I think it would. I mean, in 5 years, I mean, like, where is Roger Penske? I think that's a major question that the series is going to face. Is he's not getting any younger, and I know that they have kind of a succession plan and all that kind of stuff, but the name and the person of Roger Penske is going to carry legitimacy and weight that I don't care who else steps into that role to replace him. It's not going to be him. It's not going to be the same. So they could kind of be all over the map, and frankly, nothing would really surprise me. I just want them to still be around and still running the 500. I don't know. Being an IndyCar fan, it kind of feels like it is riding a roller coaster, and you just don't know. You just don't know where you're going. We just got back from Disney World, so if you've ever ridden Space Mountain, completely dark, you don't know when you're going up, down, left, or right. It's all just a blind, hold on to your seat ride, and that's a lot like being an IndyCar fan.
It's a good comparison. The last 2 weeks have been a roller coaster, and we're not even talking about racing on track. We're talking just off season.
Yep.
One thing I do wonder too, and you mentioned about Roger Penske, how he's not going to be around forever. I would think. I don't know. Maybe he outlives us all. But the succession plan of IndyCar, are there ideas within that succession plan, or whoever takes over, whether it's I don't know who's second in command?
I mean, I think Greg Penske would be the Penske who would take over. I mean, my understanding.
Let's say, for instance, Greg Penske has ideas that he wants to adopt that he can't do until Roger's gone. I mean, whether they're good ideas, bad ideas, who knows? Or does he just follow the edict of what his dad? I wouldn't be surprised if his dad has everything laid out for when he's gone. Who knows? But it is an interesting thought when Roger is gone. What happens to the series?
Well, and I would be curious too. Is like we talked some this year, and specifically like you guys have mentioned on the podcast that there have been a lot of like car owners that have been relatively quiet over some of their issues. Like if they have a complaint or something, they might leak it to somebody, but they don't ever want their name behind it. They've mostly kind of fallen in line. This year there's been a little bit more conversation than prior years. When Roger's gone, I'm curious if a lot of those owners, I guess I can't say Michael Andretti anymore, but if the Chip Ganassis or whoever else, if they all of a sudden find their voice and their confidence because it's not Roger sitting across the table from them, it's Greg, or it's somebody else that just doesn't carry the clout that he does. I don't know that would be good for IndyCar. We've seen what that looks like when owners kind of rise up against a series. We certainly don't want to go down that road again, but that's all stuff that is not too far in the distant future.
Anything else you'd like to add before we let you go? Yeah,
so and I texted you this last week. Your take on charters is killing me, Caleb. So like one of the things you had said last week was, like you had, I don't know if you thought or like you would it's kind of assumed that like charters were there to kind of help the series grow. I think was the term that you used. Like I don't think charters were ever intended for growth in numbers. It was growth in financial gain for owners. I mean, I think that's really all that charters were ever generally intended for. So I am a lot more on board with this charter system than I think what you were. I had to kind of check myself because I really was finding myself agreeing with Justin a lot more than I was comfortable with admitting.
That's a big problem.
I know. So I'm not sure if that's more of a check on me. But I agree with you guys that the fact that the number of charters is different than the number of leaders circle. I don't totally understand that. I think I saw maybe somebody trying to kind of clarify that. I'm not sure if that was something you had said, Caleb, earlier this week. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I totally get the fact that it feels more country club and it's exclusive. I think that's the entire idea. Like it's when you create scarcity, then you increase, or at least you create an environment for increased value. And I think that's been the entire goal of charters. If anybody can come and go at will, then Dale Coyne doesn't really have anything of value if he wants to sell it, because you can just buy your own equipment. If you can get an engine lease, then you're good. But if you can only get in by acquiring somebody else's stuff, well, all of a sudden, Dale Coyne Racing is pretty valuable. And that was the intended purpose. He can sell his stuff, he can move on and let somebody else into the series. But now it creates a financial barrier. Like, you're not going to just enter the series because you bought a car and got an engine lease. Like, you are going to have to bring a lot more capital. You're going to have to be a lot more prepared and a lot more serious. So hopefully we can see a Dale Coyne get acquired by somebody with a lot more resources than what he has. And so that brings better quality to the series. And as far as new teams entering the series, I mean, outside of McLaren, what new team in the last 15 years has come into the series and really succeeded? And you can even argue against McLaren because they really took over a property that was already running and successful with Schmidt-Peterson. So, I mean, I don't think the series needs more of the the early days of the Juncos team or the I don't even remember what was
Carlin?
The Max Chilton race. Yeah, Carlin. IndyCar doesn't need more Carlins. They need more high-level, serious teams. So I think that's a barrier that the charter up will create that's actually going to benefit the series. So that was kind of my take on it. I had to say my piece on that for sure.
So to recap, I'm right. Caleb is wrong.
Yes.
That's pretty much what it is.
The perfect summary.
Perfect way to end. Sorry, gotta go.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure.
Congrats on winning Fantasy IndyCar. Best of luck next season. We haven't had a repeat winner, so maybe that could be you. Maybe that's what's next. Your IndyCar trading cards and your sticker, I will get those to you. You've had your interview. You've had your time to gloat. So best of luck next season.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time, guys, and love the podcast. Keep up the good work.
Thanks to our Fantasy IndyCar Challenge winner for joining us. Don't forget, you can always find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for the email list. It is free to subscribe. You'll get emails for new episodes and special announcements. Plus, you can check out the store. We have t-shirts and stickers available for you on there. You can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier and others for their support. You can follow us on social media, IndyCar Podcast on Twitter /X, also on Instagram, on Facebook, search for New Track Record. You can email us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. And as always, download and listen for free on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, YouTube Music, Player FM, Overcast, CastBox, wherever you get your podcasts, and listen in for free. Mailbag time, and we start with some responses from last week's episode. We had a good discussion on the Renus VK getting dropped to Ed Carpenter. A few people thoughts on that. This from Muhammad Ulit. I hope I said that correctly. Thank you guys for being unbiased for VK. Very underrated, just a fast driver with zero money. That seems to be where he's at in his career, unfortunately.
And so many drivers over the years that can fit into that category. Right. In a perfect world, the best drivers are in every seat, but money talks, especially a fledgling series like the IndyCar series with not much in the way of capital. It's better than it was, say, 10 years ago, but still not to the point. And even you see at the highest level of motorsport, right? Formula One, if you're bringing money, it's going to help your cause. So this isn't something new. This isn't something relegated to the IndyCar series, but across motorsport. But hopefully Renus VK finds a home.
Yes, and more than just an Indy 500 only entry. Bauer Racing said, finally someone has the guts to speak out about the straight build cap, referencing Buddy Rice.
I'm not saying it. I mean, it works for him. I guess maybe it's just because we're so used to it. I couldn't pull it off, but it just, like I said last week, he always made me want to just yank that hat off and bend it just a little bit.
And then one more, this from run_mark_run on Twitter. Justin has not forgiven Alex and Connor for their amazing race performance.
I'm still holding a grudge for the amazing race.
Yes.
Did you ever watch any of that? I never did.
I think I did, but quite honestly, I don't remember. Like, I know they didn't win.
They got pretty far,
but they did get really far.
Right?
I was it third place, fourth place?
Yeah, it was something like that.
They did quite well. I remember watching episodes of it, but that's been like, wow, has that been like a decade?
I want to say it pretty close.
That's wild.
I remember just watching clips of it, but I never sat down and watched a complete amazing race.
I think I watched episodes of it just because of that.
I think it was like highlight videos put together for those two, like what they did and all that stuff. Maybe I watched one of those, but I never really watched.
So the Dallas Street Race, a.k.a. the Arlington Street Race, as I posted, has been announced, and we'll get to more on that a bit later on. But several replies on this and on other elements of this event. Mom2X over 2002 saying, I still don't foresee them promoting the race in South Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. Has you wanted a race, and we were racing in Mexico, so here you go now, hush kind of feel to it. And I live in Texas, Corpus Christi, which is 2.5 hours from the border. This or Barbara at 15 hours are our choices. Unfortunately, it's not going to be promoted outside the Metroplex. That's just the reality of the event. I don't think so.
I don't know.
You think they'll promote it in Austin and Houston? Like,
I don't know.
It's like a 3-hour drive just to Austin.
Whatever Jerry Jones wants. If Jerry Jones is the driving force behind this, I have confidence that he is going to promote it as well as any race outside the Indianapolis 500, and maybe including the Indianapolis 500.
Okay.
Jerry Jones doesn't do things half-assed. He does some stupid things with his Dallas Cowboys, particularly of late, but he is a dude
of
that
late
jumps
for 30 years.
Well, true. I guess when's the last Super Bowl they won? 95?
Yeah, it's been 30 years.
But I mean, the guy wants to win. He wants to do well. You can pick apart how he goes about that, but I think when you look at IndyCar, he's not going to be passive in his aggression to make something successful. I think he can be a very good, not a promoter himself, but bring the financial capital to a promoter that can really make it. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. Like in terms of new events, this has been as tepid of a response in a long time from fans. And I don't really understand it, quite frankly.
As far as a track layout, Tyler_Allen posted just a Google Maps screenshot of the Dallas-Fort Worth area and all the highways, and said, I think we all know what the track layout should be. It's just
an
circling
oval.
all the highways there.
It's just like
I joked fastest from Allen to Midlothian, if you're going north to south.
It's one of those cities that if you want to get from one side, technically you're still in Dallas, area, but it's like an hour. From one side
minimum.
to the other. You're like, I'm just going across town. It means different.
It is the most sprawling city I think I've ever been in.
I've never been.
I enjoy it, but it is very sprawling. Historic Hot Lap said, man, if only there was a track in that area that IndyCar could easily race at, something with lights even so they could night race, something with some traditions would be better than a street race, in my opinion. And that really just kind of transitions us to really one of the other next things, and one other, this from one Bodicher, doesn't bring in an untapped market and will be worse than the previous race in the market. Very meh all around. So the tepid response, as you said, fans not real thrilled with this event. And again, we don't have full details on it. We do know it's a street race. We do expect it to be in Arlington. Beyond that, we know the announcement's supposed to come October 8th, that from Marshall Pruitt in the Racer Mailbag this week.
So we'll have a lot more details next week on this, and maybe that'll excite some people. But here's my thing is, when you consistently say, where does IndyCar need to be racing, that it's not racing? It's been talked about the Northeast and Texas.
Yes.
Right? And Mexico. And we're hearing more and more that sounds like there could be a Mexico race as soon as 2026.
Mm-hmm.
And you're adding Arlington as well. And I think Marshall Pruitt said it best, because somebody from Texas wrote in to this week's mailbag basically saying, well, why don't they just race at Texas? Well, he goes, and it is perfectly said by Marshall Pruitt, quote, why try something new when there's something old and unsuccessful to hold on to?
What?
He says, having been to TMS 20 plus times since the first IndyCar race and seen it become a shadow of its former self in terms of attendance, the argument to do nothing new and go back to where IndyCar was a failure is not one that can be made if the series is going to grow. He says, and who knows, maybe the race around the Cowboy Stadium would be a failure, considering the sorry state of that team and its penchant for failure. It just might rub off on the race. But since TMS has a long history of delivering small IndyCar crowds, it makes sense to try something new to see if something better could be done down the road in Arlington. And if that event sucks, there's always TMS to consider. What's one of the biggest problems we have with IndyCar is not trying new things. And here's a new thing, and people are like, whatever. I don't understand it.
Because Jerry Jones is likely a part of the group behind this, this gives me a lot of confidence, because he is a promoter. He can promote things, and he can drum up interest. Yes.
I mean, just walk into Cowboy Stadium and you can understand.
It's an have you been there?
I have not been there.
It's an unbelievable stadium. The video board, which was like the first of its kind at the time, like I went to a game. I mean, it's been 10 years now, but the video board, you're just in awe, and you're watching the video board because, like, why even watch the field? The video board's so unbelievable.
Of the field almost, right?
It's an amazing feat of engineering, and that area does make sense for a race. Downtown Dallas never made sense for a street race. So, but you had posted, weird reactions from people regarding the Arlington street race. It's clear Jerry Jones and company see what Miami has around Hard Rock Stadium. He wants to replicate it, but with IndyCar instead of F1. Great opportunity in a huge population area. The response has been tepid at best. Remember, this is in between Dallas and Fort Worth. It's perfectly located for everyone to get to in that area. And a lot of replies here. DJ_Maldonado said, because it's not Cleveland, which, I mean, I don't think that's happening.
But hey, if there was a Jerry Jones in Cleveland that was willing to sponsor a race, then I bet you it would happen.
He follows that up. Everyone complains IndyCar isn't doing anything new, immediately complains when they do something new. Michigan, Texas, Kentucky, Kansas City, blah, blah, blah. Do these tracks want IndyCar? Imagine the arrogance to believe all IndyCar has to do is pick up the phone and declare a race date. And we talked about that last week, and Nathan Brown had a good post. That, look, Texas and TMS not interested.
Yeah, they're not interested. And it's not, IndyCar should just rent out TMS and and have a race. Let's say the first iteration of the Arlington race in 2026 gets 30,000 people across the weekend. Let's say 20,000 for the race, which is not very many people, but let's set our sights low to start and say 30,000 people for the weekend. That's 3 Texas Motor Speedway races, because you can say at best over the last 5-6 races at TMS, they've gotten maybe 10,000 per race.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe.
15 maybe. I mean, that's an event that used to draw 90,000, 100,000. Like, the attendance
days,
has been
crazy,
sliding for years.
Nobody's going to TMS to see races. And thanks to Eddie Gossage, it was on the schedule long after it probably should have dropped off because of lack of attendance. IndyCar tried, TMS tried, nobody went. And I don't understand why people are like, well, why are they racing Arlington? They go down and race at Texas Motor Speedway because nobody went. Nobody goes. So they're trying something new, something that IndyCar fans love to throw out there. Take a chance, try something new. And then certain people crap all over it. I don't get IndyCar fans at all. I don't understand you people.
I'm sure that's going to warrant a few responses.
I'm
Tyler,
not saying everybody, but there's a certain portion and a vocal portion that's like never happy.
Well, it's always the loud minority, right?
Correct.
Tyler_Allen said, I think it has more to do with how the brass have been treating fans in the constant years of empty promises. I get it's a good market, good location, etc. But they didn't even try to make other races work. I mean,
which I think is false. They tried to make Texas
work. You could maybe pin that on other races, but you can't say that about TMS. They raced there for a long time. Poet Shevchenko says they've got to have a full lineup of support races and events at the venue. You can't just have IndyCar show up and be on track for a couple hours each day and say good enough. And yes, that is the thing that ovals need to do a better job of, right? You need to have support races. You need to have more going on than just race on Sunday. Which
is tough because there aren't a lot of series around the country that race on ovals.
Yeah,
that's the problem. It's easier to find
big ovals.
Right. It's easier to find support series for road and street courses than it is ovals.
And that's why IndyCar's found a sweet spot with basically mile or less tracks, because you can have more support series.
Yeah, it's easy to run lights there, those things, but
USAC,
everything from Mazda series to sports cars to all that stuff, none of those race on ovals.
Racer Mac RTP1 said because it's another street race parking lot that everyone has said that they've had enough of. Need races at tracks, not events in major markets, because the product is far subpar at the latter.
Who are all these people that say that street course races are not good? Like, people go. Look at Long Beach. Look at St. Pete. Look at Nashville when it was downtown. I mean, it was kind of a growing thing. You were there a couple times. I don't understand this. It's just now. Am I concerned about a quote unquote parking lot race with memories going back to Houston? Yes, but that's why I threw in the track in Miami that it goes around Hard Rock Stadium. That is a first-rate facility and it races well. If Jerry Jones has eyes on doing that and have IndyCar race there, I don't find a negative with that. I don't know. I'm having a hard time finding a lot of people that are saying that street racing is bad.
Elsewhere, other replies, because_race said, oh no, let's try something new, facepalm. Ed Joris said, the area around the stadium lends itself to an IndyCar street race. If JJ is behind this, talking Jerry Jones, should be a highlight of the season. Dan_Schwartz says, it's 1.6 miles from one end of AT&T Stadium complex to Six Flags. Plenty of room for wide sweeping turns without narrow 90-degree city street turns. Lay out the course right, Long Beach, St. Pete, Las Vegas. Lay out the course wrong, Detroit or Crashville. And then Brady BC3. I'm very excited. This could be big. Yes, it could. We don't have the full details, and I think we'll have more of an opinion after we see the layout, which I would assume will be announced.
The 8th.
Yeah, the 8th.
And I'm sure Tony Kottman has been involved in creating the circuit, which he always does a great job, feels like. and it's going to be scenic. I think you kind of throw it back to Houston and you had Reliant Stadium and that was it. And then a bunch of concrete. You look at Cowboy Stadium, you look at the baseball ballpark, right? That's adjacent to it, and Six Flags, all kind of in that complex. So I think having it right next to an amusement park is a tremendous selling point for families. You would think, right? Let's go watch racing. Kids will go, one day on Saturday we're going to Six Flags. Sunday we're watching the race. I think that's a tremendous sell.
And again, it will fall where they're not going to compete with the Rangers game, most likely, because it'll be in late March, right? But like right before baseball season starts.
Correct.
So to me, it all works out if they get this right. But
I mean, you could quickly go within 2 years or from 0 races in the market of Texas, Mexico to 2 races in the market. And don't be surprised if these are back-to-back races in March, where they go to Texas and then go to Mexico, or Mexico, then Texas. I could see the 2026 schedule looking at least the first 3 late races to St. Pete to Texas to Mexico, or St. Pete to Mexico to Texas. I think that's what we're looking at as far as a March schedule in 2026.
We shall see. Other entries in the mailbag. So I had posted this. To think the craziness, this was at the time at Andretti, all goes back to Zach Veach's pastor. You remember?
Right.
That's how he got the sponsorship. His pastor basically gave him the lead for Gamebridge and Dan Taurus in Group 1001.
It's few like a replies. Butterfly
yes.
effect,
Mom 2X over 2002 said, "This is an Andretti driver I'm excited for, and I am not an Andretti fan." Poet Shevchenko adds, "Guess who just got his seat back?" And Lynn _IndyCar said, "The power of networking." Yes. Mm-hmm. It's wild. Everything ties back to that. Who would have guessed?
Just very wild how things can come and go. And that is just the impetus of so much that has happened over the last several years in this sport.
In particular, in the last 2 weeks of craziness.
In the last 2 weeks, right?
Also, and you had posted this, so much IndyCar media and pseudo media angst, and the off season has just begun. Just remember, New Track Record podcast loathes everyone equally.
Just want to remind everybody that.
Yes.
So it's like between Jenna Fryer going back and forth with people, and then Jenna Fryer, you sent me the link, posting on
Track Forum,
and basically, look, I know in a male-dominated field, like covering auto racing, it can be hard for a female. But man, that was just if you haven't seen it, you go to Track Forum and check it out.
If it's still up, I don't know.
I don't know, but basically calling out if it was indeed Jennifer, whether it was or not, the poster called out the misogyny of IndyCar fans, and I'm sure it's just like that with NASCAR fans. And then calling out the people that don't like her because Robin Miller didn't like her, and all this stuff, and what she can report. Because basically people were calling her out for not reporting earlier the issue with Andretti and trying to play it off as breaking news when other people were like, oh, this has been in the works for weeks. The problem is or not a problem, but she's held, and Nathan Brown went on a decent
rant,
I guess. I don't want to say a tirade.
Yeah, it wasn't a tirade.
Basically of what you can and cannot report based on the information you have. And in my background in journalism, I know where they're coming from. Like, you can know everything about everything, but if you don't have anybody going on the record, you can't report it. You're a reputable news outlet. You can't just throw things out there on social media and some be right and some be wrong and there be no repercussions. If you work for the AP, if you work for the Indianapolis Star, you are held to a much higher standard than me or Caleb or any Joe Blow on social media, whether you have paddock access or not. And that was basically what she was portraying. Now, I don't think she is always the most approachable, or she is abrasive at times, for sure, particularly on social media. But the fact of the matter remains, she's right in what she can and can't report based on the standards she's held to, which are incredibly high.
It often takes, 2, if not 3 sources to be able to report a story, like in their instances?
You prefer 3. If you can get 2 solid on the record, you feel really good.
Yeah.
But if you have one person, you usually can't, unless you have one on the record and then a lot of silent. Like, you need multiple people to confirm anything. And Jenna Fryer was vocal too and saying, she kept asking over the last several weeks and just was being flat lied to and couldn't confirm it. And so it was basically, media against pseudo media versus the people that support the AP and Indianapolis Star to people that don't. And it's just been a mess. And it is very entertaining, though.
Yes.
For all of us on the outside.
Yes.
To check out.
A few replies. AJS_500. We aren't journalists. We're just people that have a platform to talk about race cars and what has already been reported. Yes, that is what we do now.
Exactly.
On occasion, have we broken a story on this podcast? Yes. I don't do that unless I am 100% certain the person who's telling me that they have the information and they're correct.
Do we talk rumors all the time?
Yes, of course.
We can.
And we clarify that they're rumors.
Right, exactly. But when you are held to a much higher standard than any of us are on social media, when you are part of a reputable news organization, that you have to have sources. You can't just throw stuff out there. And basically that's what Jenna Fryer and Nathan Brown were talking about, is basically they know a lot of things they can't report. They think they know a lot of things they can't report. But if you're a Joe Blow on Twitter that can throw anything out there and there's no repercussions for being wrong, yeah, you're in a position that maybe you break something quicker than somebody else, but you also are wrong a fair amount of times as well.
DeGuerra said, I wish you could review the beat writers. Look, IndyCar needs more beat writers, so I'm not going to say anything negative about the beat writers.
No, it seems like the beat writers have beef with each other.
Yeah.
That's clear. Whether you're talking Marshall Pruitt or Nathan Brown or Jenna Fryer. Jenna had a great point, too, is like it sounded like she doesn't have to cover IndyCar.
Yes, it's more that she does it and because she has a budget, as any journalist does, and she fits in IndyCar into the budget along with her NASCAR and, covering the F1 races in the U.S. budget as well. Basically,
her saying on her track form, if it was indeed her post, basically, when you're at the level of attention and ratings that the Truck Series gets, basically you should be lucky that I care this much about IndyCar.
And that's a
and
fair
she's
thing.
Not wrong, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a good entertainment for us to sit back and watch when, there's plenty of infighting inside the paddock, but when the infighting is in the media that covers the paddock, it's a next level of entertainment.
Get your popcorn ready.
Yes.
As Terrell Owens once said.
And the off season is still so young. But no, we're not going to say anything bad about any of the beat writers. They all do a tremendous job and incredible service. And just because they're not first on something doesn't mean they're bad reporters or anything like that. They're held to a much higher standard than the rest of us. And
Jenna had, I wowould say, the best article on the Michael Andretti situation, getting more on the record stuff and more information that I haven't seen elsewhere. One other comment on this, S2000_Moose said, here's the poll question: which official story is less believable? 1, Penske IndyCar's explanation for how Penske made the push to pass mistake in quotes, now IndyCar lucked into, also in quotes, catching them, or 2, Michael Andretti choosing to step away from his race team. Death is not an option. Less believable? I feel like the Michael Andretti choosing the step away thing is less believable, sadly. I want to believe it. I really do. But there's just a lot of weird stuff, and we'll get to that in news and notes here shortly.
Right.
But it's hard for me to buy everything on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a lot more than meets the eye. I mean, you're trying to put a unified front forward to maybe hide the ugliness behind it, but this is not the way that Michael Andretti envisioned going out in terms of his ownership of his team. That's for sure. So let's dive into that as we switch to news and notes now. Actually, sorry, I got one other email I forgot that we got to get to. This is from Elizabeth, who emailed us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. Hello, listen to a bunch of Formula One IndyCar podcasts and enjoy yours more than most. Your discussions are excellent. Well, that makes one of you. Thank you. It's like the two people that were at the Phoenix race, you and Nathan.
I wanted to be sure you know that not everyone disagrees with the comments about Rossi being overrated. You were right on the mark when comparing Rossi and VK. VK drove inferior equipment to nearly match the results of someone driving for Andretti and McLaren. Rossi had far more opportunities to finish higher and win races. Carpenter's team has struggled for years. I'm still very unhappy for their treatment of Daly, seemingly blaming him for their failure as a team, and Carpenter should have stepped down as a driver 2 years ago. Granted, all the drivers not on CGR or Penske are fighting an uphill battle, but when you compare Rossi's performance with awards or any of the other numerous McLaren drivers this year, it's clear that Rossi is simply a good self-promoter thanks to his podcast and Instagram posts. VK deserves to drive with a better team. I speculate that Rossi joined the team and will put up mediocre performance because he wants to be an owner of the team. Probably got a stake in it as part of his deal. Ari Buddy Rice. After the split, I was a Champ Car fan and refused to watch the Earl, except when Champ Car drivers were in the Indy 500. Castroneves has won 3 Indy 500s, 3 with asterisks. So fortunately, I only saw those ugly straight build caps Rice wore if his photo was in a sports story. Bleck.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for writing in. And yeah, I do think there are more people out there that do agree with us and not downgrading Alexander Rossi whatsoever. I just feel like
we have to. It's a numbers oriented sport, and we look at the numbers.
You break it down.
Like, I get that we like certain people. I mean, that's human nature. But the data, we looked at the data last week, and you missed it. You can catch up, and we had a great discussion about Rossi, VK, and Rasmussen in that decision on the team. I think really the 20. I think someone else had posted. Like it was from the 20-minute mark to the 37-minute mark, roughly talking about all of this. So yes, it is a valid discussion. We'll see how it plays out. We'll let the results on track speak for themselves in 2025.
Ed Carpenter Racing is going to be helped by the influx of capital, definitely. But I just don't see that having an impact on Alexander Rossi's career, where all of a sudden he's winning multiple races per season like he did in 2018 and 2019. I think those days are gone, quite frankly.
I would agree.
Alexander Rossi.
I would agree. Likeable driver for the most part. His personality, some people love it, some people hate it.
Just the fact of the matter is, of the last 5 years racing for Andretti and McLaren, he's never been higher than 9th in the standings. You are who you are. And I don't think Alexander Rossi, I think Zach Brown said, we're going to offer you what we think you're worth. Alexander Rossi, which he's fully entitled to, feels he's worth more. And now he's with a midfield at best team.
Okay, now let's get to the latest on the Andretti story. There were rumors, and this from Marshall Pruitt, Racer.com. Growing division between Andretti and Taurus has been alleged by numerous paddock sources in recent months, but no proof of the matter has been established. That is key in all this, and I think that's what Jennifer I was kind of upset about. And then in her article in the AP, really good read, basically she says, no, Dan Towers did not steal Andretti Global out from under one of the most successful racers in American history. Those were her exact words. Also, she added this detail: this does not impact Marco Andretti's Indy 500 ride with the team. There was no hand force. And also we learned this: Dan Towers signed the charter. And so that's why the Sportico report came out. Mm-hmm. That's how they got tipped off, because someone in Penske tipped off Jay Penske, who owns Penske Media Group, which also owns Sportico.
Right.
That Dan Towers and not Michael Andretti signed the charter. So that is what started that whole thing. And both Michael Andretti and Dan Towers have denied that Michael relinquished his ownership stake in Andretti Global. So that's the latest.
It's not as cordial as they are making it out to be.
I agree with you there. I want to believe with 100% certainty that it's Michael wants to step back. He's been in motorsports, his whole life, and wants to do more strategic stuff and kind of be more of an ambassador and not be involved in the day-to-day operation, which that is what they're saying.
Right.
And Michael even did say, I'm 62 years old, and you only have so many years left to do things. I've got a lot of great things I've happened for me in my life, and now's the time to enjoy some of them. And I'm sure this is some of the element, but you also just wonder, the F1 thing falling through, how big of a factor is that?
Well, and maybe the inevitability of them at some point getting into Formula One in the near future, maybe 2028, as soon as 2028. We'll see. it can be a positive for Michael Andretti, I think, with everything that he wants to accomplish and what he wants Andretti Global to get into. I just don't feel like this was entirely his decision to do this now.
And he says he'll be at the Indy 500 this year. Beyond that, he doesn't know in terms of races he's attending, which is fair.
Then if he's there, is he a visible part? Is he in Andretti Global's area? Is he just wandering? Is he? I don't know. I don't know. You know what would be great?
What?
Michael Andretti, even for a couple races in the booth in Fox.
Ooh, that could be interesting.
Just to
I'd be intrigued. Yeah. Marshall Pruitt also reports that there are more operational changes with Andretti Global personnel under consideration. This could be personnel shifts in IndyCar and their F1 initiative. And then one other note, going back to the leader circle thing, it was Michael Andretti and Dan Towers who pushed Penske to expand the leader circle to cover all 25 charters. And Penske basically took umbrage at the idea. That was in this week's Racer.com mailbag. So again, we're stuck at 22.
Would you like to see, if your two options were $1 million for 22 or 800,000 for 25, what would you choose?
You choose $1 million.
Right.
If you're a team owner.
Right, but what would you like it to be?
I'd like it to be $1 million for
everybody. But
yeah.
That's not an option.
Yeah, I know.
$1 million for 22
Correct.
or 800,000 for 25.
Yes.
Yeah, it's tough.
Other notes, one other note on all this, then we'll move on. Zach Brown resigned from the Andretti acquisition board. So
now,
he was on there.
What does that mean exactly?
That's that SPAC thing. So they can create these and they can raise money and, go public if they want. That's all I understand. Beyond that, I don't understand these SPACs.
Yeah, me neither.
Elsewhere, we had testing for Felipe Drugovich, the Brazilian, testing with Chip Ganassi Racing, and Jamie Chadwick with Andretti Global at Barber Motorsports Park earlier this week. Chadwick still trying to put together something for IndyCar for next year, but also has the option to return to Indy Lights with Andretti next season. And Drugovich, obviously there's no openings at Ganassi, but anytime you can test a young driver, a guy who we thought was on IndyCar's radar last offseason as well, so something to keep in mind. Other news, Fred Watch officially over. Alonso confirms no current plan to pursue another run of the Indy 500. Focus on F1, so we can say goodbye to Fred Watch. IndyCar had their victory lap celebration the other night, which, again, why isn't this streamed on YouTube or something?
Yeah, kind of weird, isn't it?
I thought that was odd. Sam Schmidt has opened a paralysis center in Indianapolis to rehabilitate trauma victims. Good write-up by Jenna Fryer in the AP on this. Something he's been working for a long time, not just in his recovery, but also to put this together. But congrats to him on opening that up. Other notes to get to, as we've really kind of rattled through. We talked about the Dallas street race. Marshall Pruitt had that story that he broke again. October 8th is the date as far as when we expect an announcement. It'll be around AT&T Stadium. Really not a whole lot of official details, but Jerry Jones expected to be involved. That's the key thing.
Which is what we talked about. And if you're wanting to race in that area, here's my thing, and you want somebody that is heavily involved in promoting sporting events, is there anybody better than Jerry Jones in that region?
No.
I don't think so either. And he's not going to skimp on investment in terms of this event. Particularly, we'll find more about this next week, if it comes around that he's looked at Hard Rock Stadium and the investments around it with the Miami course and the Miami GP as I want to do something similar. That would be huge for IndyCar.
Time for tweets of the week, and it's one tweet, and it's simple. Someone, David Malukas fan, had posted a Halloween costume idea to scare David Malukas, and it's a picture of a mountain bike, and David Malukas just responded, "Ah!"
I wonder if he's been back on the bike yet, or if he's.
It's a good question.
At the very least, to stay on streets and sidewalks. Right?
Yes, got to stay on solid pavement.
Yes, I would hope so.
All right, did we miss anything?
No, I think we took what was a pretty skimpy week and turned it into something, didn't we?
Yes, we did. That's what we do here.
That's
all
what
right.
we do.
Time for our random split air driver of the week.
Well, I was digging and digging and digging to try to find somebody, and I know he's been around. I think people maybe don't remember the fact that PJ Jones raced so much in kart and mostly Champ Car.
Yes.
But PJ Jones is who we're going with. Random split air driver of the week. Of course, the son of now the late Parnelli Jones, and raced mostly in NASCAR and Xfinity series. Did almost 80 races across the 3 series in NASCAR, but did do 58 races over 4 years in Champ Car, and then a couple IndyCar races, which were the Indianapolis 500 races that he did. But we'll talk about him in over 2006 and 2007. Those were his IndyCar, 2 of his IndyCar races, 2002, 2004 as well. But let's talk about his kart days, 96 through 99, portions of 4 different seasons, all with All-American racers owned by
Dan Gurney,
and of course Dan Gurney and Parnelli Jones, good friends, and then running him as well. So PJ Jones came up in the Indy Lights, or formerly the American Racing Series, with, have you ever heard of this PIG Racing?
No.
Which is like pig racing. I don't
No,
know if
I've
they call it pig, probably not. But it was PIG Racing, and then Landford Racing actually won a couple races in 1991 with Landford Racing, which was then Indy Lights, won at Toronto and Denver. But in his kart career from 1996 to 1998, no wins, no podiums, a best finish of 7th 2 different times. Chicagoland in 1999, and
well, no, that would have been Chicago
Motor Speedway. Yeah, excuse me. And then Rio, he did, have a podium, a second at Nazareth in 1999. He had 4 chances to race at the Indianapolis 500. 2002, he withdrew while a member of Team Menard, and then had 2 starts in 2004 and 2006 with Curb Agajani and Beck Motorsports, finished 28th and 19th in those appearances, and then did not qualify in 2007 with Team Leader Motorsports. Do you remember them? I don't.
I recall the name. PJ Jones drove one of the coolest Indy cars, the Screaming Eagle Castrol car.
Yes. Yeah,
he drove that car with Dan Gurney in 98 or 99. But that's all time one of my favorite liveries.
Here's an interesting thing about PJ Jones. Everybody think, well, he was the son of Parnelli Jones. He was destined for racing. He was actually a really, really proficient hockey player when he was younger. Scored 98 goals in 30 games in a season in Pee Wee hockey in California when he was like 9 years old. But was hindered by a surgery several years later in his teens and had to stop playing hockey when he was in 15 or 16 years old. He was big into aircraft and stuff, but then got into auto racing once his hockey career really ended. So he has, I don't know if he still has PJ's Performance, which was really was kind of part of his like off-road vehicles and stuff. That's what he did. But he did some super trucks. He did, again, some NASCAR and some truck series and Busch series. But well known, obviously, as the son of the late Parnelli Jones. PJ Jones, this week's Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
All right. Thanks to our Fantasy IndyCar Challenge winner, Nathan Harden, for joining us. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. We'll be back next week. Hopefully more IndyCar news as the offseason rolls along here on New Track Record Podcast.